Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9-to-5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.
Everyone, welcome to Life Her Podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Chelsea Furr, the director of Honesty Works, a company dedicated to grief and trauma recovery and violence prevention. Chelsea is an accomplished writer, trauma specialist, and advocate for focuses on heavily and helping parents navigate through challenges of PTSD while raising children with a wealth of experience and certifications, including the certification of grief recovery coach, mindful coach, and Chelsea has become leading voice in supporting parents through many triggers and difficulties they face during child rearing. In this episode, we'll dive into her expertise of PTSD recovery, peace parenting in the midst of healing, and her insights in violence prevention. Get ready for a powerful conversation about healing, resilience, and finding peace as a parent or even as an adult of running a business and so much more. Hey, Chelsea.
Hello, Yvette. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm very excited about this conversation. I'm excited about you just being on here and giving us a lot of great informative information and transparency of your personal life and experiences. So I appreciate you.
Well, girl, I like to talk, so I'm happy to be here. And I love sharing the good news that recovery is possible from complex trauma and that we have the power in our communities to prevent abuse. And so I love that compliment that we can heal as abuse survivors and that we can prevent this systemic issue in our communities.
Yes, it is very much needed. Before we actually dive into all of the professional information that you have to help us, I want to know, how did you end up getting in this space of wanting to help people? Because a lot of times people either get into it off personal experience and it had motivate them to help others, or it's things that they have saw over the years of growing up and everything.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it is absolutely a personal journey that led me here. And it also is the environment that I grew up in and seeing the need that we had in our communities for a voice that was drawing attention to things that systemically and traditionally we keep quiet and handle maybe behind closed doors, but we have not seen that that has been effective. So I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was born into a family. We had a professional musician as a father, and my mom was an LPN. She was a nurse, and there were a lot of really good times, and there were a lot of really dark times. I had multiple perpetrators, and there was a lot of addiction. My mom was actually a heroin addict. And there was a split family and lots of stepbrothers and half brothers and sisters. And within that world, there was neglect and abuse. And so as I was growing up until the age of 12 or 13, that was the last time I actually had trauma done. But there were multiple perpetrators. One was a dentist, a neighbor, father, and then my brother actually was one of the perpetrators as well. And then there were friends of his. And so when I say multiple perpetrators, it's an astounding thing that happened. But it's a story that I've heard from other people. And so that's kind of my origin story of wanting to make sure as a parent that my children were protected. And I was also a teacher. And so I saw so many vulnerable children, and I personally knew the after effects of abuse. And so with that origin story, I wanted to make sure that as I grew in my wisdom, I was able to share what was really helpful in healing personally from trauma, from complex trauma, and also what we can do in our communities and within our families to prevent that type of thing from happening.
Wow. You said that you were a teacher, and
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of like up and down stories of teachers not really caring about the student. Say, for instance, you have a student that have behavioral issues, or a student that does things very odd that isn't quite normal. What
Mhm.
is some advice do you have for teachers that work with students in the school districts to actually kind of be a little bit more aware about a child, of what they're doing in their feelings, and actually look more into it instead of just attacking their behavior and reacting to basically send them to the office or detention or, outrage?
I love this is why you're so successful. That is such an excellent question. I actually got into teaching not because I was like, woohoo, I get to teach history or math. It was because I wanted to catch the kids who were falling through the cracks, just like I did. Now, education for me was the thing that propelled me out of my family. So I have my master's degree now, and it was a love of reading that really enabled me. Even though I dropped out of school for 2.5 years in middle school, I just sat at home and read Harlequin romance. But it was reading that really propelled me and that was my path forward. So when I became a teacher, it was for kids like me, right? Teachers had been a solid rock upon which I could stand through those really rocky years. And I wanted to do that too. And then when I got into the classroom, it isn't about catching those kids. It's about making sure we're teaching state mandated curriculum.
Yes.
And so I found myself, yes, right, in this really challenging situation where I did have kids that were exactly like me. And I had to either turn a blind eye to them and just kind of go along to get along while focusing on those academics, or I could focus on them, but then the academics it was very challenging to meet those expectations. So to every teacher listening, I just want to let you know my heart is with you. And it is one of the most challenging jobs I have ever encountered in my life. We're being asked to do too much, and we do not have the resources that we need. So that's my first thing. When it comes to behavior management in the classroom with children that you suspect have really challenging home lives. Now, often as mandated reporters, right, we will call and do a report, but unless there's physical evidence when somebody shows up at the house, there's often nothing done, right? There's a report
Right.
made, but there isn't resolution. And so when you have children that you suspect have very challenging home lives, whether it's abuse or neglect, then we have to make a decision. And the decision that I came to in my life and how I spent the later part of my years as an in-classroom teacher is to make sure that first and foremost, I'm providing a safe environment for every student, and that I was focusing on those relationships. And I have to tell you, did I always get my learning objectives on the board when I was doing that? No. Was every lesson just exactly what the state wanted to see? It was not. But I was working with integrity within myself and meeting the needs of those students who really did need a safety rope.
Yes, that is so needed. Even sometimes in situations like that, say for instance, as a teacher, you reach out to the parent, but the parent
Mm-hmm.
isn't helpful with the
Mm-hmm.
behavior or isn't aware. And some parents are the property of their environment because maybe their parents were like that, and down the line is generational. So if you don't have a responsive parent that is involved in their child's academics and parent teacher conferences, and you
Mm-hmm.
make them aware of their behavior and everything, how would you shift the classroom for that child for you to do as much as you can to help them in any
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah. So if you have strong administrators in your building, if you have administrators who really will pull a student and allow you to continue teaching, you can still work on the relationship with that student. But the primary thing is hearing what that child is trying to tell you. Who are they and what are they trying to say? And when you focus on that aspect of the relationship, who is this child and what are they trying to communicate with me? Then you open up a world of possibilities within the classroom where you can meet their needs, creating safe corners for them. Oftentimes, those students are not going to be your learners. They're going to be participants that are your helpers throughout the day. And we just have to accept that fact that sometimes we're not going to get them caught up academically, but we might be getting them caught up emotionally.
That is great. So say for instance, also about a parent that may reach out often and need some sort of help, or a parent that is difficult and always blame the teacher or the staff and everything for their child's behavior. How is it possible that someone could support a parent to provide a safe space for them? Because a lot of people deal with trust issues, or sometimes they feel as though you will call state on them and get their child taken away.
Yes, absolutely. So I absolutely love your questions. I have resources on my website, and they're around parenting with PTSD or CPTSD. So teachers, you're welcome to go, you can pull them for free. And then also you're welcome to refer your parents there if you think they're open to that idea, like, hey, have you thought about this, right? So that they have resources too. But there are ideas embedded within these the PDFs that I have that you can download that will open up the opportunity for a conversation around what's really going on. So whether you're working with undocumented parents, so there's a lot of fear just within that realm, right? Because they might not want to show up in the school building because there's so much fear there. So whether it's a parent like that, or it is a parent who hasn't been parented themselves and they haven't done the growth that they need, we can very gently support them by providing scaffolds for parents. And it isn't exactly our job as teachers, but it is our job to meet the needs of our students. And when that need is supporting parents, what we can do is see if the counselor of the school would be willing to have nights where parents can come and they can have open conversation about what is stressful for them, right? What's happening for them in their world, so that we as a community can support them and they can then support their children better. So there's a couple of different things. If you do some research into trauma, right, as trauma-informed teachers, you'll find that there's a real wealth of understanding that we can come into this with, just to hear what is being said, not verbally, but what's being said with physical communication or a lack of communication, and meet that parent just as we do with the student, meet them where they are. It is so validating for people to be met where they are. So if they're agitated, we're not going to ask them to calm down. We're just going to hear them. What are we agitated about? Because that allows us to get underneath to where that fear really is lying. They might appear angry, but we want to get underneath that. So let's just listen. I think across the globe, it's really important that we take a soft stance and we listen to what people are truly trying to communicate, because often it's fear-based.
Yeah, it is a lot fear-based off like experience of watching a community. Then social media doesn't make it any better either. So people's lives basically based upon of a lot of things of what they see, you know. So it kind of makes it very difficult for us that are genuine advocates and actually here to really help people become a better version of themselves as a parent, as a worker or just anything as a person as a whole?
Yes, and I think it's really important. So before we even got started, right, transparency was a word that was in communications from you to myself. And I believe that as we move forward in our life, if we're talking about teachers supporting students and parents, a difficult parent, let's say, being transparent with them and about your own struggles, about what might have worked for you, being open can open doors for real communication and real possibility for growth for that parent in their parenting journey. That if we just stay hidden behind the status quo, isn't accessible to them. And that's not fair. If we have insight into what could be helpful, finding a way to offer that in a non-confrontational way is really valuable, whether that means really exciting your community about having resources at the school for parent nights, right? Where parents are coming not to see what their kids are doing so much, but how can I grow as a parent? Really finding ways to plug in to help parents grow, because we can't grow in silos. We just don't. We don't see the best options available to us. So we have to start being more transparent in our own journeys in order to encourage other people to be like, oh yes, I do have the wherewithal to do this, or I don't feel good when I yell at my kids every single moment of every day. How can I change this? Being honest about the fact that, hey, I used to too, I have screamed at my kids and seen the fear of God in them, right? And been like, whoa, let's step back. So we have to be transparent about that so that we can encourage other people. This isn't a dead end road. This isn't a you road. This is a humanity road.
Ooh, yes, Chelsea, that's right. It definitely is. So you mentioned earlier in the interview of teachers being able to go on your website to get information and everything. I want to take it a little bit forward from that. And what inspired you to create Honesty Works, and what are your primary goals in areas of grief, trauma recovery, and violence prevention, so they could actually know more about what you do and how your company helps many people?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I absolutely love what I do. And the biggest joy that I have in life is, one, helping people to have joy in their life. I lived for so long where 40 years, it's really been 3 years where I have finally had my feet planted firmly in an identity that is unshakable. So I love helping people find, why is it that we're coming home from work and watching endless amounts of television or scrolling endlessly? What can we do to remove the stressors, the horribleness of life, so that you feel like you can engage with people again, that you have energy to truly live? That brings me so much joy. So I love this aspect of my work as a coach, in helping people identify really negative core self-beliefs, reinstate beliefs that are true with a capital T, right? That we can stand on and not be shaken from, recover from complex trauma. It can really impede our life. And at the core of that usually are those negative self-beliefs. And then that prevention piece, it really is shining light into the corners of families and communities that we tend to shy away from, but which in my life, and honestly, the statistics say 1 out of 6 women, 1 out of 10 men. But if you have been in a room full of women or a room full of men and women, it typically is around 90% of people who have had some type of sexual trauma. Then we really, really need to stop pretending like it's too something to talk about. And we got to start talking about it loudly, over and over, in all places, at school, at home, at church. Because I'll tell you this, when I went to church and they told me that if I accepted Jesus, I could be cleansed of my sin, they never told me just how much dirtiness I was feeling because of somebody who sinned against me, because of the sins done towards me. So we need to talk about this. It affects people and it affects them deeply.
Yes. And it's funny you brought that up because the world is like super sexual, and it's a lot of people that dealt with sexual harassment in many different forms. And sometimes we need to also talk about how people won't speak up, and the threats that they receive during the time of them being sexual harassed, and also them facing the individual like later on in life, or you may see them or anything. And I've seen some people that dealt with that, they feel sympathy towards that individual as well, if they're getting old, or if they did prison time, they still have some sort of connection. What advice do you have for someone that's dealing with that don't know how to speak up and still find that they have some type of loyalty and connection to the person that affected their life, and how they could move forward from that and figure out ways to heal from it?
This is an excellent question that isn't talked about enough. So some of the abusers, right, were family members, and there isn't a loss of love that I hold for them. I want the best for them. So I had to come to terms with the fact that the bad guys, they're human, and that means that they also have good guy qualities. Bad men, bad women also have good women, good men qualities. And that means that they are lovable, and most importantly, they can be redeemable. Now, I'm not an advocate who's going to work on their behalf, right? That's not my role in life. But I do believe that it's important that we talk about not just Stockholm syndrome, where you're associating a love with somebody because, you were in a forced abuse victim relationship.
Right.
What I'm talking about is truly understanding we have empathetic hearts. We can understand that people who do really bad things that traumatize us sometimes for life and cause years and lots of money in therapy, they also have good qualities, right? And so, And so as we're working within that, it is so incredibly important for men and women to create healthy boundaries. And that starts with self-love. Now, it tells us in the Bible, love your neighbor like yourself. Well, girlfriend, we have got to learn how to love ourselves first. You can't love your neighbor unless you're loving yourself. So we have to learn what it means to truly love ourselves. And that means with healthy boundaries, we can love, we can pray for, we can absolutely support somebody who has done harm to us. Is it going to be healthy for us to let them into our lives on a daily basis? Probably not. Probably not. Right. So we need to learn what it looks like to have healthy boundaries first and foremost, especially as former victims. I don't love that word victim, but as somebody who has been abused, we need to make sure that we are instituting healthy boundaries first and foremost to love ourselves, to actively love ourselves. After that, we can start working on, and that includes really changing some of those core beliefs, right? We don't want to have core beliefs like I am unworthy of kindness, I am powerless. We want to have I am forgiven, I am cherished, I am worthy, I am valuable, I am protected. Those are the truths that we want as our core identity. So once we have that kind of shift in our belief system about ourselves, and we're able to have good boundaries, we're able to recognize what that looks like, then the process of forgiveness starts taking place. So if you have a relationship like that, it's a grandpa, it's a father, it might be a priest, it might be a mother, an auntie, a babysitter, whoever it was that harmed you, does not mean first They need to be in your life. But you can forgive, and it is not an act towards them. That forgiveness is for you. It's for you, so that your heart can flower and flourish.
Yes. So I want to ask you a personal question. With you moving forward in life, did you find it difficult for dating or the process of you just being married and everything, and still like do different times do trauma appear in your life, and if it do appear, how do you work with it as far as you having a partner in your life with communication and letting them know how you feel, so you could still have boundaries but you could still show each other love and support?
Woo, you are so good. Okay. So yes, I never became, a lot of kiddos who are sexually harmed, they become pretty promiscuous. So I never went through that phase. I did marry somebody who was pretty narcissistic and selfish. And it was more of like actually a physical barrier between me and my family. That was more what that relationship was. I realized I didn't love him. And then it was a couple of years before I was able to like truly own that. And so we see that trauma process there. Like, if I'm honest, how can I live? Right. I'm going to push this one thing that's in front between me and my family away. And I thought I was unlovable. So if I was honest that I didn't love him, like, who the heck was I? And so that right there is a trauma response. But I grew. I went through therapy. I did everything that I needed to do to get to the point where I could be honest about that and let go of somebody who neither one of us were happy, and we weren't helping each other. And then I went to Nar-Anon, which is a support. It's kind of like Al-Anon. It's for people who have alcoholics or addicts in their family. I went through that because it was free. And I needed therapy, and I had lots of addicts in my life, and my ex-husband was an addict. And so that was such a wonderful experience of group healing, and being able to come and not have the whole show be about me, but have the whole show be about, this is how much this affects us. And just saying that in a group, I am very affected by people around me choosing really crappy things, right? So I did that. And then I worked through hypnosis, through therapy, through self-talk, through DBT. I did a ton of different types of therapies for a few years, learning to love myself.
Wow.
Learning what it meant to go blameless before God. And so then I had somebody, the love of my life, happened to move in across the street. And I thought that they were nothing. They were gray hair, stoop shoulders, gray. We lived in a gray place. And I was like, but he was friendly. And so we chatted, and I didn't give a crud what I looked like. And so it was the first time I had been honest with a man, because typically I came from that abused place where I presented a certain way. While I didn't want them to think I was sexy, I didn't want them to not think I was sexy. And, there was a whole game to it, right? Because ultimately I thought men were after one thing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like I had to pretend. I was just myself. And Caleb, this is the person, thought that I was the most beautiful person. And I'm talking, I had an 1.5-hour commute each way. I was a teacher. I was slugging it out in a slum, and I was coming home. I was like, no hair, makeup off. And he thought I was divine, right? And I was like, what? This is amazing. And of course, I now think he's the most handsome man ever. But it really took that time, that healing time of learning what it meant to forgive myself, to forgive others, and to love myself before I was able to have a relationship that was built on honesty.
Yes. And time is important. I don't think people really realize that. Because sometimes they will jump one relationship to another, or they will just basically just start laying flat into their grief, their PTSD, their trauma, and
Mhm.
everything. And they're not facing the fact that, hey, I need to take time out for myself, heal, um, do praying, journaling, counseling,
Mhm.
just that time alone. Can you stress to people how important it is to have alone time, to not be in a relationship so soon, and
Mhm.
practice learning how to be alone for maybe months, weeks, years. Like it's so important because you start to face things into your reality that you didn't know that exist. And a lot of people don't know releasing a lot of that will open many doors for you to build healthier relationships and meet people that meet your spirit.
You are so good at your job. I just love your questions. Okay.
Thank
Yes, it
you.
is so important to take time. So they say for every 5 years being married, you need to have 1 year on your own. So if you've been married for a decade, that's 2 years of time on your own before you're dating again. And this is like in therapy circles, right? So because not only are you unpacking those 5 years in the year you take to yourself, you're unpacking those, but you are unpacking the lifetime that led you to the point where you spent 5 years with somebody that you then deemed wasn't the right person. So that's a lot of work to do. And
Yes.
so if we spend that, several months really digging in, like what led me to this point, what was my belief system about what marriage looked like, about myself, about who God was, about what I wanted out of life, all of those things. And it takes time. Now, when we're talking about grief, time doesn't do squat. I could lose my partner today and be in grief in 20 years. It's what we do over time that matters, right? And sometimes time, we just need time as a frame for things to fall away, to sift,
Yes.
right? You gotta sift through the wheat and get the really good
Mhm.
stuff, right? And let that chaff fall away. And so when we spend time, like you said, my brilliant friend, we have to journal. Start writing it down. All the good, all the bad. Go on my website. I have a pregnancy and PTSD journal. I have a PTSD and parenting journal, right? Start figuring out what are my triggers? Where is this coming from? What beliefs? So when we look at our actions, that's a huge one. We get
Yeah.
our actions and we trace it back and we're like, what the heck am I thinking? Because I'm yelling at my kids. What am I thinking? And I'm thinking, I never have any time for myself. And underneath that,
Yep.
what is my core belief? I am
Mhm.
unworthy. I'm the one who didn't create time for myself. So underneath that thought is I am unworthy. That's the belief. So we need to see action, trace it back to what am I thinking, and trace those thoughts down to what my core belief is. And then we got to yank that shit up. Excuse my language, but we got to
Okay.
yank it up,
Yeah, you
you
do.
know? And so, yes, journaling, taking time, like I said, for every 5 years you're with somebody, spending a year on your own, doing a self-discovery journey it's powerful. And we are humans are so powerful. Women are so powerful. And we have to give ourselves time to
Yeah.
develop that, right? And to sit with ourselves. If you're running away from yourself on TikTok all the time,
Yep.
well, why? What are we doing, right?
Mhm.
Because we are precious. We are precious people and we are honored and we are loved. And we need to allow ourselves to really feel that for ourselves so that we can then
Right.
pass that on to our kids and in our communities.
Mhm. They're so important. So, um, you have a lot of things that you are great at as far as what you have is PTSD recovery, grief recovery, addiction recovery, complex childhood trauma, peaceful parenting, shame and healing, violence prevention, and mindfulness. I really want you to let parents know how this all could
Mhm.
come all in one, but not knowing if you're dealing with all of these things, the reflection of you not being healed will
Mhm.
show into your children, and it could cause a chaotic home. It could cause your child having troubles
Mhm.
at school. It could cause you dealing with your trauma with dating multiple people or trying to find love or even just socialization overall. Can you let parents know how important it is for them to heal, not only for themselves, but for their children, so their children won't be the product of them as they grow older or build some sort of resilience towards them, and they don't know that they parent hate that the child hates that part of them.
Yes. So I just want to give you $1,000,000 every time you ask these beautiful, brilliant questions. And I wish I could. And I hope somebody in your life does. So good because I love breaking generational trauma. And now there's the study of epigenetics. So there's a book I'll recommend called What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. She was an NPR broadcaster and she was a beautiful researcher, and she had a lot of childhood trauma. She has a lot of research in that book. So I'll recommend that to listeners. Now, when it comes to generational trauma, we can have genetic stuff that really, I mean, it's a real thing. They've shown it in studies that our genes can change with trauma and be passed down to our young. So we have a lot of work to do. And I believe it can be done because I am living proof that even with super complex trauma, right? Multiple abusers, lots of addiction, just how the heck did this girl do that? You
Right.
can heal and you can stop it in its tracks. You are not going to carry that forward, right? And it takes work and it takes time and it takes friendship and it takes wonderful podcasts like this where you're learning new things. So when we talk about children, so as a teacher, it broke my heart because at times it felt like our school day needed to be an hour of academics and 6 or 7 hours of like, how can we just bring joy
Yes.
back into childhood, right?
Yes.
And so as parents, it is so critical that we take those healing steps and not to get to the point where we're not only not yelling at our kids, but where we can enjoy being in their presence because we don't have anxiety pounding at the back of our head saying there's a million other things you need or want to do. But we are happy enough to drop into a present moment to hear the delight of a 4-year-old. Have you heard a 4-year-old laugh lately? It's like a maniacal, crazy person. You're just like, oh my God, there's so much joy right there, right?
Yes.
Or to hear a teenager, one of my girls talk about feminism and just really be in the moment with them and hear their take on what they're seeing in society. These are precious, precious things that we have in front of us, but we have not healed and we have allowed our anxiety and our fear, right? That's underneath all of that there's lots of different ones to overtake those moments. And so when we heal, when we start being able to drop in, even if it's 15 minutes a day, to really be present and to really listen to who our kids are, it opens up this joy-filled treasure chest in life. It's like right in front of you and you never knew. And you're just like, holy cow, it's just here for me, ready. And
Yes.
so when we take those healing steps, we are enabling our children not to see perfection. We are never going to be perfect. We are human. They are able to see what it looks like on the path to becoming a wise human being. And
Yes.
that is a powerful lesson for the next generation to take into the world, that not, I can't make mistakes, but when I do, not only can I love and forgive myself, I can learn from them and I can stop harming others around me. That's like
Yes.
world changing, right?
Mhm. Yes, it is. So my thing is, how can you give a parent advice? Because
Mm.
now in this day and age, you have a lot of fathers are single parents as well as mothers being single mothers. What advice do you have for parents that are trying to heal and navigate being a parent at the same time, because it's a hard job. And along the
Mhm.
way, parents can lose their identity through raising their children, protecting them, and making sure they do everything, so they drown in the lives of their child. How can you help them with some advice on how to still have their identity, still have their life, and still be able to heal and still know how to balance that life?
So there's a couple of, I'm going to give you some solid tips first and then let you know some kind of more esoteric ideas. So solid tip is aim for 10 to 15 minutes of really present time with each of your children every day. And I don't mean like cooking breakfast, cooking dinner. I mean like, and not even really doing what they want to do, but where you have purposefully set aside in your mind, I am not going to worry about anything else. I'm not going to think about anything else. I'm going to be fully present with this person for 10 to 15 minutes. So that's my first recommendation, because you'll catch some really interesting stuff if you just listen and you're present, right? You want to know who am I hearing and what are they wanting me to hear? You'll hear layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, even if they're just talking about lunch. Second thing, when you're asking your kids what they did at school that day, ask them what they had for lunch. It is a weird opener, but it's like magic. They say nothing, but when you ask them about lunch, they're like, well, I had corn, it's overcooked, had a little paprika on it, right? They'll tell you all about like, and then it'll remind them about stuff, right? And even if it is just your conversation about lunch, that's fine. Go ahead and keep it there. But that's a great door opener. And then the third thing is notice what is triggering you. So first, do a little research. You know, the internet's available to most people. Do a little research, talk to some people. If you need therapy, go to a free resource like Nar-Anon or Al-Anon, something that's a support group for people who have addiction or addicts in their life, right? Or there are survivor groups. Find something like that that's free that you can attend to, because you'll get a lot of insight into people there and into your own healing process to find what triggers first and foremost are. Usually it's yelling, it's rage, it's anger, it's isolation, things like that. Once we identify those triggers, let's start walking the cat back, right? So go backwards in time, be like, well, 5 minutes ago, did I feel this way? Well, yeah, 5 minutes ago, I was thinking how hungry I am, but darn it, I just can't stop to eat because I got to do X, Y, Z. Okay, walk the cat back a little bit more. So 5 minutes before that, were you feeling angry and upset then? Well, what was I was scrolling through the news and I saw that so-and-so did, and you're like, bingo. Okay, that moment when I felt out of control, when I read that news story about another school shooting or some president so-and-so did this or something, that's my notable moment, right? Then you can be like, okay, so can I avoid reading anything really stressful before the kids get home or before bed? So what can you then put in place? So these are some really solid strategies, the 10 to 15 minutes of really purposeful, I am not doing anything else. And I am like here just hanging, not thinking about anything else with my child. Also making sure you are understanding what your triggers are, right? And then asking kids what they had for lunch. And then my fourth really solid advice is journal. I had a really crummy day today, and see if you can read back what that was. When we put things pen to paper, it truly is helpful to unpack our day and to unpack our thinking and unpack after we get our actions, our thoughts down into those core beliefs. And I have a free PDF on my website. It'll have like 25 beliefs, like core beliefs that a lot of people have who'd had any kind of trauma, which is all of us, right? And then if you're a Christian, it has things from the Bible, and then so who I am according to God, and then who God is, who's the God that's saying this. Now, if you're not a believer, I wasn't a believer for a long time, so hey, y'all, that's totally fine. I will create a resource that's like, here's core beliefs. Here are new beliefs, truths about humanity that you can start instilling once you find that core belief, right? So I'll have that resource on my website too within a couple of days for our listeners, so that they have that access too. If you're not a Christian, that's I want to make sure that this is available because this is a humanity thing. This is how can we create a better world, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be a believer. It means that you can.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. And then esoteric stuff, we like when we're talking about really big ideas and healing, when you have generational trauma, and that means pretty much all of us, right? Even if we're very wealthy and we don't seem to have a lot on the surface, humanity, we have issues. We have things that cause trauma to us. And so when you have that type of systemic trauma or generational trauma, it's really important to do a little bit of research, notice how that's affecting you, right? How did the way your parents raised you affect you? If you were given, how has that affected you? So really start looking at what was happening a few generations back and how is that affecting me today? Because then you have the opportunity to start growing, right? And growth is really what my business is all about. It's making sure that as an individual, as a family, and as a community, we're taking a hard look at where we are and saying, is it good or not? And if it isn't good, let's put the time in to create goodness, because we can do it. We have the tools and resources to do it. It's inexpensive oftentimes and free. Oftentimes it just requires a little sweat equity. So I'm all about sweat equity. Let's do it. Let's do this, because once we heal, we get to this new place where then we get to go out and start affecting, ripple effect. And that's powerful. Even if I don't make a cent, it's power, right? To be able to really help people heal. And so as you in your business, creating the Life Her podcast, this is an amazing opportunity for people to spread the word about change and growth and positivity.
Yes, definitely. So, with that being said, can you let people know how to contact you and utilize your services and be able to have the opportunity for you to help them heal from any sort of trauma that they are dealing with on a personal level?
So my website is honesty-works.com, and I have a blog there. I'm also on Substack, so it's just Chelsea Furr. It's my name, the Chelsea Furr Honesty Works Substack. So I do a lot of articles there around healing. I have a book that'll be coming out next year called Honest, a redemption story, and it walks people through kind of the vast array of trauma that occurred up until my teenage years and what I've done to heal since then, because I believe wholeheartedly that everybody can heal, and it doesn't look the same for everybody, but there are some core components that are accessible to every human. And then I'm also on TikTok. So oddly enough, TikTok is super fun. So I love doing ridiculous videos on TikTok, but I am on there and I have some very valuable stuff there and on Instagram. So Instagram, it's Honesty Works Honestly, and TikTok is Honesty Prevents. And so these are the main ways. I do have Facebook, but I feel like I just can't quite get a handle on all the Facebook stuff. And so I am at Honesty Works on Facebook as well. But I'm not there too often. I kind of throw stuff up there every now and then when I remember it. But Instagram, TikTok, and then my website, honesty-works.com. Those are the main places where people will find me.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Chelsea. I enjoyed this informative conversation on individuals helping to heal in many ways and having important conversations that we rarely hear on a daily basis. I appreciate you and with everything that you do.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. You are just a divine host, and I hope to come back someday and be able to be here again. I really appreciate your work.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Life Her Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed this amazing episode with Chelsea, and you can follow us on Life Her Podcast, which is on all social media platforms, and you can listen to us on all platforms of audio. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9-to-5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.